I started in the 70s. My bedroom was a saddle shop with a bed in it. My bed at one point was under the shelves that all the tools were on, and one night in the middle of the night it collapsed right on top of me. I'm Gordon Andrus. I'm a professional saddle maker, silversmith, other trades too. Any raw material is fair game to me. There's no place I want to be except in this building making stuff. But this area is the saddle shop. This has been my main occupation for the last, maybe 25 years. So I'm in the process of starting a saddle. And what you can see here is the leather I'll be making it out of. I'm building it for a working cowboy in California. There was Tandy leather back in those days. There was a man named Al Stolman who developed tools, craft tool brand of tools, and then he wrote dozens of books telling you how to use the tools. It was a great way to sell the products. And those of us that didn't grow up in a saddle town, that's how we learned. And so, my buddies would come in and say, "What did Al teach you today?" And I swept the floors in the factory in the morning and then did leather work, in the afternoon. And then when I got into college, I was in a local tack store, and there's a saddle shop in the back, and I just asked if they needed someone that could do leather work, and they hired me on the spot. And all through college then I was the repairman. This is called a saddle tree. What I'm responsible for is putting them as close to the middle of the horse as I can. And there's a sweet spot on a horse's back. If you put a tennis ball on their back, it'll roll right to that sweet spot, and that's, they say, like the 13th, 14th vertebra. And that's the place on the horse that moves the least. The thing that's most important for me is that it fit the horse and that I put the rider in the position where they can be part of the horse. They can become one unit. Something that's going to make the most contact with the most of the horse that it can. You might think it would be better if the tree was flexible, but that actually hurts the horse. It's like a backpack. But if you got one that fits your back and can be held snug in place, then more of your body can carry it. Well, the fastest I've ever built a saddle was in 30 hours, and that's lickety-split. This saddle will take probably 60, and I've gotten slower as I've gotten older, but not because I've gotten older. I've gotten slower because I can see more. I'm kind of known at this stage in my life for saying every detail wants attention. And I look at this project as a thing that's asking me to do certain things. If you want to work faster, you're better off not learning to see as well. When I was learning, I was like, that'll take forever. Do you really have to do that step too, and that step too? And I've added so many steps to those steps. It was then art school and everything. Then we get to Cody, Wyoming, a local shop that makes and sells gear to go packing into the mountains with mules and horses. Needed a saddle maker, and I'd built two. And so then I just said, hey, I can make a saddle. And they sent me home with a tree and a bunch of leather, and I had to go to Alberta and get a sewing machine and get outfitted. Back then in the early 2000s, I could put my truck, I'd go to the bank, got a loan, gave my truck, and I was like, this sewing machine's worth more than that truck. Why don't you just put the lien on the sewing machine? And they're like, no, we don't recognize that. So anyway, I got set up and got going, and then had a steady stream of saddles for three 3 solid years, just one right after another. And really, that's where I got my chops, was doing that. This was built for an exhibition. It's fully functional, but it's not intended to ever go on a horse. If somebody has it someday that wants to put it on a horse, they certainly could. But this, this is a piece of sculpture in the shape of a saddle. That's how I look at it. So then I inlaid this horn cap in also. Every detail wants attention in Latin. Omnis portio egui operum. Each portion wants attention. This picture here is a piece that I made for this same exhibition. It belongs to the Brinton Museum now. These 4 dogwoods are my dogs that have passed away. Oh, wow. And when I was stamping this, I just lost Buddy, a golden retriever that was, I just love dogs. And I was having a tough time. He was a special guy. Little Lindy in here is another one. They break your heart the minute you meet them. It's like that's the cost of admission. Yeah. And so I did this as part of my grieving process, and I wanted to create a space that was without dimension, and so that you can't go into. And then these 2 daffodils from the back are my wife and I watching them. But these leaves coming out represent something that can go back and forth into that realm. I'm not going to call them angels. I don't have a real strict idea of religion, but the spiritual space, wherever that is where we can look at those that have passed on and hope that they're playing. That's called 4 dogwoods through a darkling glass, which comes from Paul talking about, in the New Testament, now I see through a glass darkly. And so that's the darkling glass that I'm trying to see through to see and they're playing. When I was in college, I came across this book, The Saddle Makers of Sheridan, Wyoming. It was in the college bookstore, and that was one of the pivotal kind of moments in my life because I wasn't aware of Sheridan. And there were two makers in Sheridan. That one, Don King, was a little older than Bill Gardner, but he was working for Bill Gardner's father on the ranch, and Don was making saddles for Ernst in town. Don worked in the ranch animal hospital part of, and he was in there making saddles at night. But he started to refine it and make the flowers smaller and the stem work and everything just more graceful, and to the point where it was a completely different thing and extremely beautiful work. And that's what I saw in this book. Don was making them, then Chester Hape took them over, and he was younger than them. And I got a chance to meet him. So I'd gotten this saddle made for a customer, and I kind of developed these flowers of my own that came off of an old, much older style where you're kind of looking over the top of the flower. And Chester, his son-in-law, who's a spur maker, had a bunch of his saddles in his shop as an exhibition during the leather show that happens in Sheridan. And so I was down there. I'd never met him, but I was aware of his saddles, and I was looking at these saddles just wow, wow, wow. And Chester walks in, and he says, is there someone here that made a saddle that's over in the show that has these flowers that you're looking over the top of? And I was like, yeah, I think that's my saddle. And he just started to tell me how wonderful he thought that was. And that, and man, I was 44, 45, but I was like a kid. I just, like, the floor, I couldn't feel the floor, and I was just like, I can't believe this is happening. And so, but then we went on to talk, and he told me crazy ranching stories and horse stuff and different things, and we just had this great conversation. And suddenly I was friends with all the saddle makers in the West. But kind of at the top of the game, I always think that this can't be the right number, but between 20 and 40 of us. And it's probably more like 40 or 50, but there's like this kind of top tier, I guess, and they're not very many. And I think we're fitting horses better today than we ever have for cowboy type saddles. In the history of this trade, it's not very old, 5 generations, maybe between 4.5, 5 between me and the first makers of the Western stock saddle. It was only started, it really only developed in the 1860s. And so if you go from there to me, there's not very many saddle makers between me and the first makers of this type of saddle. We want to make it work for the horse, but if you're going to be riding as many miles as some people do, you're going to have a string of horses to use, because there's not a way to, well, their feet, their legs, everything will break down if they go too long. Mm-hmm. And they'll get saddle sores from the best fitting saddle if you rode them too much. You know, this is what my nieces and nephews do, just like that, and it, you know.
Oh, it worked though.
Yeah, it works okay.
But sometimes
it works much better if you stay there, and I don't want to have to be the one to back up. So.
Wow.